This is the Authority Company Podcast, conversations with leaders who are building the future. Well, I'm Joe Pardavila, and my guest today is Randy Thurman. Randy is a certified financial planner and CPA and CEO of Retirement Investment Advisors, a billion-dollar firm focused on helping people turn their savings into lasting income. For nearly 4 decades, he has guided retirees through one of the biggest transitions of their lives, and he's been recognized as one of America's top financial advisors by dozens of national publications. He's also the author of the new book, Retire with Confidence, 52 Questions to Ask Before You Retire with Expert Answers. It's a practical guide built around the real questions people struggle with as they approach retirement. Randy, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm doing well, Joe. How are you?
I'm excellent. And I want to start our conversation sort of off topic, but on topic, and this idea of longevity. You've been in this biz for 4 decades. You've been doing this for a long time. And you've probably noticed that many of the clients and people you work with are living longer. So the question I always get from folks as I talk about, when we just because I'm super nosy and I ask about their retirement journey and preparedness. And like I remember my late father-in-law always stressed that he was not going to have enough money if he lived deep into his 80s. And I'm sure this fear has happened a lot during the course of your career talking to people, but now people are actually living longer. So how does that affect the retirement game, longevity and retirement savings?
Longevity, we're retiring earlier, we're living longer, and we're saving less, and that's a formula for disaster. And it's something that you've got to plan. Yeah, of course, we don't know exactly how long you're going to live, right? And someone said you want the last your paycheck to the undertaker to bounce. All right, so. But when is that going to happen? You just don't know. So I think it's better to have money when you pass away than be living and be broke. So I try to work out a plan that lasts 40 years or until you're 100. So as I tell my clients, I'm off the hook when you hit 100. So
That is a common problem, right? For folks that maybe they just don't know, because I guess that's the thing. It's like, what's that magic number, right? And obviously, as you get into retirement, budgeting is a big part of it, like how much you spend, how much you need. Tell me about how the budget piece works into all this, because I think for a lot of people, it's hard to wrap their brain around it because they're so used to living their working life of knowing the exact amount of money they make, and then it could actually increase over time depending how successful you are. So tell me about this idea about budgeting and budgeting to live to 100.
right, right. Well, it is, and it's scary because they look at the income, and I guess I would too. It's as your safety net, right? And now you pull away the safety net, and you're living off your investments. And budgeting is a tricky thing in retirement, and you have to sit down and look at it because for everyone it's a little different. And how much are you going to travel? There's a wide range, so you have to sit down. And a lot of the times, people come in, can I retire? And I'll say, well, yeah, but I don't know, on what income do you want?
Right.
And it just depends on the situation and the individual. And the individuals, they just vary so much in terms of income needs and budgeting needs, but you need to sit down and look at what you're going to do. Most people can live on less in retirement, and they say, well, why less? Well, you're not putting in money in a 401k. Now, you're not paying FICA, the 7.65% on your side of the deal. So there are some things that you're not going to do. You're not going to buy maybe clothes, very expensive clothes sometimes,
Right.
in terms of that. So you just have to look at. But on the flip side, you've got to worry about healthcare costs too. That's a big bogey. So I'm on Medicare now, and I've paid in Medicare my whole life. I thought, wow, that's great. But now I need a $1,200 a month medication. So and it's not
Wow.
covered. So you got to be careful. So
It's funny. So I will say you're not the first retirement expert I've spoken to. So I don't want you to think I've been cheating on you, but I have spoken to others. And
okay.
a common thing that they bring up with folks that are in their retirement is they're spending way too much money on their children and grandchildren. And it's something that they probably weren't doing when they were adults, because their adult kids are like, "Oh, okay, the adult kids have a job. I've got a job, no worries." And then all of a sudden there's a switch flips, right? In your retirement. And then all of a sudden you start spending on your kids and grandkids. How do you ride that with your clients? Because I'm sure, as you joked earlier, the fact that, you want the last check to the undertaker to bounce, but at the end of the day, you also want them to make sure that they maintain this lifestyle. What about that dynamic of spending too much on your children in retirement?
Well, that's a challenge, and, it's been said that grandparents and grandchildren get along so well because they have an enemy in common, and I see it I see that a lot, but I don't see them spending so much on their kids as they do their grandkids. That's really
Okay.
the issue, and you've gotta control that, and you gotta say, "Hey, the best thing you can do for your children and grandchildren is to make sure you take care of you. Make sure you take care of you because you don't wanna be dependent upon them." And, that's the thing you've gotta keep in mind is you gotta take care of you, and if you're gonna give it all away, then you may end up in a situation where you're dependent on them, and you don't want that, so
Yeah, yeah. All right, so talking about the book, you built it around 52 questions. Why did you choose this sort of like question format instead of like a traditional guide? Tell me about this idea about the framework that you set forth here.
well, I was doing a client appreciation dinner, and I was looking over the fairly large crowd and thinking, I've got a ranch hand over here, I've got a surgeon over here, and yet they all ask the same retirement questions, over 40 years, very, very similar. So I decided to take that 40 years of answering those questions and try to put it in the book. Now it sounded not too bad, not and easy, but once I got started, it just kind of morphed into this a very difficult challenge because you can't answer every question, of course, but I worked very hard in answering the 80% that comes up over and over and over and over and over and try to answer those questions. So that's kind of how I did. Trying to share my knowledge, try to help out, and helping is a big part of who I am. So
That's great. It's funny. So, Randy, I used to work in morning radio, and so that meant I would have to do a morning shift from 6 to 10. And the most common question I ever got, I'm telling you, if I've got this question, if I got it at the dollar for every time, I'd be retired already. But the question was, what time do you wake up in the morning?
Hmm.
And so that, and then of course I would say, well, 3 o'clock in the morning, and their eyes would bug out of their head. And I explained to them that, I need the time to get up and do the prep and all that stuff. What is your "what time do you wake up in the morning" question over like, and I know you got 52 of them in the book, but what was the one that you felt like you almost got almost all the time at whether it was like a holiday party, barbecue, or something like that? What was the number one that you most often got from folks?
Well, the number one question certainly would be, "Am I financially ready?" There's another one that they should ask, but they never do. But the "Am I financially ready?" comes up all the time, and I hate to always start off with, "Well, it depends," but it does depend. It depends on a lot of things, and so you work it out. You look at the income that can be generated for 40-year time frame, and we say, "Yes, can you have a comfortable retirement with this?" And they can say, "Well, yes or no," and then if they say no, you say, "Well, do you want to work longer?" And you go down that decision
Right.
tree path. So, but can I financially retire? Is not well, I would say the one I hit over and over and over.
And on the subject of questions, in the book, you write that retirement is paved with questions, so it fits perfectly into the theme of the book. What question do people avoid the most? Because obviously the question is, am I financially viable to do this? But like, which is one that they avoid asking either you or themselves?
Well, the number one question they should ask, and they don't, would be, "Am I emotionally ready?" And because there's a lot of I saw a study where someone tried to quantify, stress and different events in your life and how stressful they are. And retirement was just right behind the death of a spouse or a child. I mean, because
Wow.
it has so much change in it, and change, even good change, it can be stressful. And are you emotionally ready is a very big one because, what about your social life? Is it wrapped around your work? Well, what's going to happen when you retire? Are you ready to retire? Do you have something to get out of bed for? Talk about getting out of bed, and those are the things that you've got to ask. And maybe your spouse doesn't want you around that much. That's the type of thing. So we see that
Right.
a lot actually. So yeah.
So, all right, so you can answer the question once you break down the figures of someone being like financially ready, right? Like if they got all their ducks in a row, they're ready to go. How does someone become emotionally ready? Like this idea of that disconnect. And I know for years my friend circle was always my work circle. So there was that Venn
Right.
diagram and the big chunk of it was work friends. And I think that goes for a lot of people these days. I know more and more people are intentional about having more friends outside of their neighborhood and which is good and healthy for them. But what's some advice or maybe some things that you've seen people do that was maybe when you asked the question if they're emotionally ready to then them being able to answer that question? How do they get there?
That's a challenge because you almost need a retirement trial period, right? And
Right.
that it's very difficult. So if you can take like a 2-week vacation, try to do a retirement, what you think is going to be retirement, and see how it goes. But 2 weeks is, of course, not enough to really try it, but it gives you a little bit of a feel for how things are going to go. But you really, I mean, really, people, it takes about 6 months to know if they're going to fit in retirement or not, and, 6 months, people say, "Well, I'm just gonna love life and do things and not do anything and sit in my easy chair and read books," and that works fairly well for a while, but after a while, they say, "I need something to get out of bed for," so
Yeah. You know, if you watch the news, if you go and experience real life, everything's more expensive. And it could be for various reasons. It could be for geopolitical reasons. It could just be for pandemics, what have you. Um, how does that fit into your formula for having people prepared for retirement? Because the idea of like, who knows how much gas is going to cost like in
right.
20 years?
Food.
Eggs, food, yes.
Yeah.
How do you factor in inflation and rising costs when it comes to to your original question about being financially ready? How does that tie in all together?
That's a great question. And I wrote a whole book on it called the All Weather Retirement Portfolio, and
Okay.
the All Weather Retirement Portfolio is designed for a certain rate of return, but it also has a lot of inflation hedge in it. So you have a high inflation rate, you have higher return, and lower inflation rate, a lower return. So I want the return without the risk, and I said, well, good luck with that deal. So you figure it out, but you need to invest in such a way that if we do have a bad inflationary time frame, I'm that's probably my number one fear, quite frankly, is a high inflationary time frame.
Do
But
you
you
bake
got
that in? Like, oh,
you bake it in, right?
yeah,
Right.
okay.
Yeah, you bake that into the portfolio with inflation hedges. So if inflation comes up, your return on your portfolio now your real rate of return doesn't go up, right? I mean, if you're making 8% with 0 inflation, you make 8%. I mean, you make 12% with 6% inflation, you're really only making 6%, right?
Right.
So your nominal rate of return doesn't go up, but your real rate of return doesn't go up, but your nominal does. So
Oh, that's good. That's great stuff. We talked about the fact that you've been doing this for a long time. Has the definition of, the phrase, and you use it too, successful retirement, has that changed over time, or successful retirement pretty almost, you hate to say black and white because there's so much nuance to it, but is there anything changing in terms of the phrasing of successful retirement that you've seen over? I mean, you've done this for 40 years, but for the let's go for the closer generation people for the last 20 years. Have you seen the definition of that change?
I don't know that it's changed a lot. I think it's altered a little bit in that people realize that if you're financially independent, money in itself doesn't bring you happiness. All right, and now it does if you're trying to decide if you're going to buy food or pay the rent. Money buys you happiness, but if you're financially independent at that point in time, things are not as important as memories. Okay, so you go out and you create memories, and if you can, then we like to share with our retirees that do it while you can, so long as it's within your budget and type of thing. But do it while you can, and there'll be a time where you can't, and create those memories, and those memories bring you more happiness over a long period of time than buying that one item, that red Ferrari or whatever. So um,
And for folks that have met retirement planners like yourself, one of the common refrains is the 60 to 80% income rule, and you challenge it a bit in your book. What should people well, first of all, for folks not familiar, let's not assume everyone knows what that means. Tell me about the 60-80% income rule and why you challenge it.
Well, there's general rules, right? And you can drown in a river with an average depth of 12 inches. Okay. And some of the general rules are just like that. That 60-80% is that you can live on in your retirement 60-80% of your income that you had before retirement. So
Okay.
and some of that, when we talk about the 401k and FICA you're not paying, and some of that's true, but you've got to do the budget, and how much travel are you going to do, how much, and work it out over a long time frame. So in the first 5 years of my retirement, I want to do travel, and maybe you take a little higher distribution rate, but then you cut it back, and go from there. So you need a long term plan, a long term budget to see what really works for you.
And you talk about the spending in terms of basic and dream spending.
Mhm.
Um, what's the big difference between the 2 in terms of, or do they not matter? Like, is one kinda steadfast and the other one is, like, sort of like you said, you're gonna plan ahead, like, maybe early in your retirement, you're gonna do more of that bucket list stuff as opposed to waiting till later. But tell me about the differences between basic spending and dream spending.
Basic spending is this is what I need to be comfortable, base level comfortable, and that you've got to be able to cover. And the dream spending says, well, this is where if I'm taking a Europe trip every year or something like that, something crazy. Usually the dream spending's too far out there. They but at least you can look at it, and you can find a middle ground that works, for them, and for the budget.
And what's the most common mistake people make when estimating their retirement expenses? So we have the basic, we got the dream. What is the most common mistake people
Yeah,
make when it comes to estimating their basic and their dream spending?
unexpected expenses. Um, the house needs a new roof and it's not covered, and that's a challenge. So you've got to have built in a emergency fund where we say at least 3 to 6 months of your expenses in cash, to try to cover those types of things that come up. The transmission falls out of the car, or whatever. There's my I've got a lot of my clients have been driving their cars for 16 years, and they're going, I don't know if I want need a new car. It's going to be time here pretty soon. So
Oh, that's right. So unexpected, also health, like you mentioned earlier, the fact that now you're on a
else,
medication that you're spending $1,200
yeah,
and you do
yeah,
not know.
yeah,
So, I mean, how can you even predict that though? I think that's the
yeah.
frustrating thing for a lot of people. Like if they're retiring relatively healthy and then all of a sudden they realize, when they're 70, oh, I got a hole in my heart. Well, I mean, what's going on? How can you prepare for something like that?
That's a tough one. It's can you prepare for every uncertainty? No, you just can't. But you do what you can do, the best you can do, and we talk about goals a lot in terms of their retirement goals, and then I'll ask people, "What's your goal in terms of this portfolio in terms of return?" And they'll say, "Well, I want as high as possible." I'll say, "Okay, what's your goal in terms of risk?" "Well, I don't want any." Well, yeah,
Right.
there's a disconnect there. So we talk a lot about goals, and sometimes they'll say, "Well, I don't want to ever my portfolio to ever go down." I go, "Well, the way we invest, you should expect 2 to 3 negative years out of 10. They're going to happen." But I suggest a goal that you invest and diversify in such a way that no matter what happens in the outside world, the financial storms or the unexpected expenses, that you've maximized the probabilities that you're going to be comfortable the rest of your life. And most people will agree with that. That's how we do it. So you do the best you can do. You plan for some unexpected expenses, but you just can't plan for everything. I mean, everyone wants to, but you can't.
I'd love to get your personal take on this, and this is not I will preface this with a big, "This is not financial advice," to everybody, but, I just for curiosity's sake for myself, because as I get older, I know older people, and, we have these debates about home ownership when you're in retirement. What is your personal take, preference in terms of being retired and owning a home as opposed to, like, renting a condo, renting a home? Because that's the one thing you mentioned, like, your roof needing to be replaced. That
Mhm.
as many, who've replaced a roof know that's pretty expensive, and that may not be baked into your retirement for
Mhm.
whatever reason. What's your opinion on the idea of owning a home while you're retired, knowing all these other factors? Like, if you have,
Right.
like, and we're taking off the table, like, the people with unlimited
Right.
expenses and trust
Right.
funds and all that stuff. What's your take on that?
Well, let's go back to our goal, and then we'll try to answer the question.
Okay.
How do you maximize the probabilities that no matter what happens in the outside world, that you've done everything you can do to maximize the probabilities that you're going to be comfortable the rest of your life. And I'm telling you, when you own your home and you're debt free, we're big debt free believers, big debt free believers. When you own your home and you're debt free, you can weather a lot of storms, a lot of storms. So you're not paying that rent. You're not paying, you got to pay your taxes. You don't
Right.
pay your taxes, they take it away from you. But you got to do that. So we like now there comes a time where the upkeep of your home and those types of things becomes too much. And that's a different answer when you get to that point, and you want to skinny down. Then we look at maybe a retirement home or a retirement village, something like that. So
Okay, cool. All right, so there is no definitive answer. Like if you have like the perfect home and the upkeep's not so bad, like you don't have like 3 acres to mow weekly, it's doable. I guess it just depends on if it all works, if the maths, it's all good. So good. Thank you very much for that answer. So here's the funny thing. A lot of your clients, and I'm sure most of the people that are ready to retire and retire with money in the bank, for lack of a better word, they know how to make money but not how to make money last. What mind shift has to happen there? Because again, many of us have been working since we were teenagers, and then all of a sudden, fast forward, we're in our 60s and we're like, we're no longer making money. But during those last 50 years, you were spending it as as it was coming in. What shift has to happen or is not happening when people don't know how to make the money last when they're in retirement?
well, that's a great question because I have a lot of clients come in and say, I know how to make money, but I don't know how to live off of it. And it is a transition. It is a shift. And they basically for analytic, we show the bar graphs and the tables and things like that. Otherwise, we show them this is the income you can live on the rest of your life based upon a 40-year time frame. Any 40-year time frame since 1930, we've looked at and show them that way. Now, a lot of times, what we do is they will go back and do some part time work for a nonprofit that they like and they feel that they're still making income, type of thing. So, and that works out well a lot of times. So.
Yeah, you write about part-time work, and how does that play into modern retirement for a lot of people? Because obviously take into account the physical nature. Like if once you get to a certain age, you're probably not going to be jumping up on a said roof. So we're talking about and fixing roofs, but you can have part-time jobs. Uh, Anecdotally, do you see a lot of your clients having more part-time work? Could be circling back to the fact that we talked about earlier that things are more expensive now. Do you see more and more people doing part-time work in retirement?
I do, and not for financial reasons, which
Oh,
is
okay.
interesting. It's they've I've had one client say, I spent my entire life trying to be successful, and now I want to try to be significant. And I thought that was a very interesting way to look at it. And he goes back and he gives 3 days a week at his nonprofit that he really has a passion for, and now he's underpaid, but still he's trying to be significant. He's done the other stuff to try to be successful. So
Oh, that's good. Well, we can't talk about retirement without talking about Social Security,
mm,
which I
mm,
know is a loaded issue for many people. There's always this dark cloud hanging over us that one day that the government's going to be like, we're spending way too much on old people. Just let them,
mm,
all this
mm.
stuff. Let's not go there. Let's consider the fact that Social Security is going to be around.
Okay.
What's the most costly mistake you've seen people make with Social Security?
The most costly mistake. Well, I think the biggest mistake, with the one big beautiful bill or whatever it was called, there's a lot of misinformation in terms that Social Security will no longer be taxable. All right,
Okay.
and that is not true. It is now they issued they pulled it back and said no, we made a mistake, but it was in a little bitty print. So Social Security is still taxed the same way. It's still taxed the same way. It's just we have a bigger standard deduction. So for a lot of people, that catches the Social Security. So it's thinking that I'm going to take Social Security and it not be taxed is probably the biggest mistake I see.
Oh, okay. And so, one of the things it's on the subject of Social Security, for whatever reason, my TikTok feed I started getting fed all this stuff, maybe because I was looking at my retirement app and then all of a sudden the TikTok saw that. So they're like, oh, let me give you some retirement content. And it was the argument about when to take your Social Security. What do you usually advise your clients about when to actually start taking it out? Because I know there's arguments for both early and late.
Mhm.
Um, is there what's your again, not financial advice,
Right.
opinion.
Right.
Randy, what do you say to folks when it comes to taking out Social Security?
Well, what do you think my first words are? Well, it depends. So And there's a technical financial answer, and then there's an emotional answer, and you can't just put away the emotional part of it. That's part of life, right? So you look at the technical part. Let's say if you're if you're going to retire before your full retirement age, which now is 67. If you're going to retire before that, you have to be very careful that you don't have too much wage income, because if you make too much wage income, they take away a lot of Social Security, and kind of penalize you for having wage income if you make more than it. Now you get it back over amortization over your life expectancy and all that. I understand that, but still, it's taken away from you. So if you think you're going to make over a certain amount of that level, and I believe it's at 24,800 right now, then you do not want to take your Social Security before full retirement age. Now, if you're going to take it between 67 and 70, then you may want to do that, and at age 70, you definitely want to take it if you haven't before. But every year you wait, it goes up 8%. So that's the thing, it goes up. Now that's the analytical type of part. Now from an emotional part, you may want to take it because you may want to be taking those trips, and Social Security is going to be the difference. You can take those trips or not, and you can do it while you can, and so long as you don't penalize yourself on the wage trap, then I say go for it. And even though from a financial looking over your lifetime, you're going to get less Social Security, but still, if it gives you memories up front emotionally, I say go for it. So
Oh, that's good. Yeah, the TikTok video I saw, Randy, I think they were, like, crunching numbers, and I know you can make numbers work any which way you want, but
Yes,
they
you
said,
can.
I if you do live a long and healthy life, you're best taking it early, because in the long run, you'll be making more money. You'll be taking in more money just because of your length of time you're living on the planet, as opposed to you can't make up that time. Like if you decide to wait till 70, it's not like you can go back in a time machine and be like, "Hey, let me get that money I missed for the last, 5 to 8 years," kind of thing. So, obviously, there's arguments for everything on that, right,
yeah,
Randy?
if you wait until 70, the break even period is you gotta live about 12 to 14 years before it breaks even.
Okay.
And that's a long time and frame, and still okay if you got very long longevity in your genes and things like that. The other thing, it also increases your survivor benefits if you wait, which is something that
Oh,
it's a lot
interesting.
of times not seen. So the longer you wait, the longer your survivor benefits goes up. Your retirement benefits for the survivor do not go up if you retire at full retirement age. So that's a little bit
Okay.
of a difference too. So, but
Oh,
but
that's good.
it just depends, right? Hmm.
Yeah. What do people misunderstand about Social Security, how it's actually calculated? Because I think for many people, unless they really want to do the deep dive and go under the hood, no one really knows. Like, I mean, I know I've had Social Security taken out of my check. I started working full time at 19. I know for since I've been 19 years old, money's been going to Social Security. But who decides how much? What is it like? It's all very opaque. I mean, I'm sure it's probably readily available if we decide to crack open the Social Security website. But can you like give it to us in layman's terms about how it all works out and how that maths?
Yeah, it's a pretty challenging. My degree's in engineering, and I'm like, why they make this stuff so hard? So, but it's fair to but they look at your 35 years of high earnings.
Okay,
So they look at that much. So a lot of times people say, "Well, if I don't work these years, is it gonna hurt me?" Well, if it's not gonna hurt you in terms of pull your Social Security down, but if you worked another year, it's gonna drop off your low earning year and add your high earning year.
interesting.
But it looks at the 35 years, inflation adjusted, and takes that number, and that's what's really your Social Security is based on, those high 35 years.
All right. So, lastly, if someone could only focus on one area, taxes, investments, risk protection, which do you prioritize? Because I know you're a numbers guy. You got the 52 questions. Is
Yeah.
there, in terms of like, if we were going to do like, they do S tiers, S to, to F, like what's S tier in terms of what you should focus on when it
Oh,
comes to retirement?
wow.
Not that, not, and I would say, not that they're not all equally important. I'm just saying if you were to tier it, which one goes on top?
That's a really challenging one because they're all moving parts, and the
Yeah.
moving part you try to design the moving parts to generate the best retirement. I think you focus on having a very very good retirement and a comfortable retirement, and you focus on what would make you happy, and sometimes people get so caught up in the numbers, and I'm a numbers guy, like you said. But for example, Social Security, when do you take it? They get so caught up in the numbers they forget about, you know. My dad used to say, son, it don't take long to live a lifetime,
Hmm.
and life is short. So you focus on having a good retirement, enjoyable retirement, a meaningful, significant retirement. I think that's what the number one thing you do.
Okay. And when you see the people you've worked with, is there a common thread as those people? Like, let's go on a high note. What's the common thread of the people that you've seen? We use the phrase successful retirement. Is there something that connects all those people together? Is there a commonality that you see all the time when they have a successful retirement where they're not just, financially secure, they're emotionally secure? Is there anything that connects all those people together?
Well, there's two big fears. The first is they want their children to be able to have to pay their expenses, so they want to be dependent upon their children. And fear number two is they don't want to someone take their car keys away. So those are two big fears, I think, for every single person.
Wow. Wow. His name is Randy L. Thurman. The book, Retire with Confidence, 52 Questions to Ask Yourself Before You Retire. Randy, thanks so much for the time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate it. It was great.
And that's going to do it for this episode. If you want to find out more information about Randy and our other amazing authors, go to theauthoritycompany.com.